at that level. And when we have the heads of businesses, you would say that it's very less. So again, it is depending on country, etc. But again, it is an issue, because what we did find was that if we do not have diversity, then people do think the same way. When we have decision making, when we are looking at new ideas, etc. If you have people who are with similar background, who are not gender diverse, race diverse, etc., then sometimes the ideas are the same one, because a lot of people studied in the same school, came from there, go to the same party, drink together, etc. And then they think alike. Yeah. So again, for an organization, if we want to really be innovative, we do need to have some people who have different ideas. So gender was one that we looked at. The second one that we looked at was on nationality. So we are a French organization. Our headquarters are in Paris. We are in 60 different countries across the world, around 145,000 people. Now, in APAC, we are not retail bank, so we are not known very much. So you may not have even heard of it. When I joined Societe Generale in Mumbai in 2006, I also did not know about the bank because it was not retail bank. So I had to do some study and then I came. And then a lot of people think that it is French centric, that we have a lot of senior people who are French. Juniors could be locals, in countries, but actually at a very top level, we do not have many people who are local. So this is something which we worked on, because it's a perception. So we do have, it has some reality, but it's also a perception whether we have enough local people at senior level. And this is another angle of diversity which organizations look at, and we look at very seriously. We are looking at things which are related to whether we have enough local talent. Are we able to groom people who are not French, for example, because we do want a mix of everything, but we also want representations from different nationalities in our management team. So that became quite important for us, and we looked at that particular area. The third one that we looked at was LGBT plus, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender plus, because we did feel that in our industry, which is banking, there are a number of talent which belong to LGBT plus, and then we are missing out on it, mostly because we are not inclusive, in the sense that we were not seen as somebody which is an inclusive organization for this kind of diversity. Yeah, so that was the main thing. Of course, we don't call out to people. We don't want people to come out and say that, okay, they are LGBT plus, etc. But we want people to feel comfortable that when they come to organization, they don't have to hide their preferences, because that's what they are. And as an organization who is going to be inclusive, diverse and inclusive, we do want people to feel comfortable. So that was the third one. And the fourth one we looked at was differently abled, which is how do we make sure that when we have first of all in our workplace, we welcome people who are differently abled, and also make them feel that competent. We are not showing sympathy towards them, but treating them as any of the other employee that we have. Now, organizations have very different kind of diversity issues that they have to look at. There could be generational gaps, for example, where you have an organization which has different generations working together, from baby boomer to generation alpha. So it could be many different things. We felt that for us at this point of time, these four are the more important diversity issues that we have to tackle. Yeah. There could be companies, or if you look at the website of other banks, etc., they have different focus areas. Now, it really depends on where your organization is. So, for example, for us in US, in our offices in US, we also have race, ethnicity, because in US, ethnicity is quite an important topic in terms of diversity. Yeah. In Paris, for example, we are quite big in mission handicap, which is for differently abled, which, by the way, we are not that advanced in APAC right now, because there are different things. So again, so we started with what we call a diversity and inclusion council in 2015. What was the aim? The aim was that these kind of things which are culture changing, like diversity and inclusion, It has to flow from the top. If you do not have sponsorship from the top, if you do not have involvement of senior manager, it does not percolate down, because for me, it has a cascading effect. Yeah. So that was the reason that we started with the Diversity and Inclusion Council. And we had our the senior most team in Asia Pacific, which was involved in this. They became sponsors of these particular networks, the four networks that I spoke about: gender, differently abled, LGBT plus, and cultural. So the senior people are there. Then we have chairpersons, which are employee volunteers who volunteered to be the chairpersons for these topics because they are passionate about it. Now, this is, I think, very important, that we cannot force people to like a particular topic. It has to be, it has to come from within, but what the organizations can do is create awareness about it. Yeah. Create awareness, do activities, but also make sure that they are embedded in day-to-day work of employees. Yeah. So, I mean, you may have seen a number of diversity activities. There are seminars going on. There are people wearing pink. I mean, we also wore pink for Pride Friday, last Friday. But again, these are only creating awareness. What we did was, in the first 2 years of our Diversity and Inclusion Council, we actually created awareness. We had a lot of events because a lot of people did not even know what it means. What does differently abled mean and why is it an issue? It is an issue because when in organizations, when you go to the office, you do not have doors which are easily opened by people in wheelchair. Yeah. When you have those push and pull kind of thing, how do you expect an employee who is wheelchair bound to actually open and go across on a day-to-day thing? If you do not have lifts, which are differently able, accessible, how do you actually go into the thing? So there are many small things. And for example, do I as an employee, am I open to having a colleague, who has a different ability, which I don't think is normal, for example, are we open to it? Are we, for example, stop feeling pity for the people who have these kind of, different abilities and actually treat them as everybody else? So again, there's a lot of awareness is required. And it seems like it's an easy task to create awareness, but I can tell you it is really difficult. We took a long time, frankly, for example, for educating people, first to understand what it means to be, like, for example, LGBT plus. What does it mean by cultural diversity? It's not only having different festivals, but really, what does it mean in real sense? What are the issues that, for example, gender, when you have gender imbalance, then how does it work? Now, we call it gender diversity because in some countries, for example, in China, we have more women than men, who are in senior position. Yeah. In Taiwan, we have mostly women and men are in minority. So again, in some areas you have more women, where you have, in some areas you have more men. So again, it's a balance which is there for us. So the first 2 years went in a lot of education, lot of awareness sessions, etc. And then the hard part comes. Okay, so you must have heard of unconscious bias, and then we have a lot of sessions which people do on unconscious bias. Now, why do you think people do that? Anybody who wants to maybe talk about it? Have you heard of unconscious bias, for example? I don't know if you can unmute yourself and maybe participate. Cannot? Okay. Sally, I saw Sally unmuting herself.
Yes, ma'am. Is it a kind of non-accepting people coming from different backgrounds? In a institution or in a corporate world, if
Mm-hmm.
someone is coming as a new person
Mm-hmm.
with backgrounds different from others,
Yeah.
maybe in terms of religion or caste or color, in
Mm-hmm.
in their mind they will think of, they will have a certain certain bias thought that okay, she is like that, she is coming from there, she is dark skinned, a lot of things get
Yeah.
clubbed in.
Yeah, I mean, exactly, Sally, you're right. And these are the things when we, for example, when we have people with different nationalities, people think that, oh, this person is French, so he's like this, he would talk a lot. If you are Indian, then you do like this. And a lot of people still tell me that, oh, if you are Indian, you should have long hair. How come you have short hair? How come you are you're wearing Western clothes, etc. Those kind of things. So there are stereotypes which are there, which are coming out of unconscious biases. And it has deep implications in organizations, because when we are hiring people, if managers have this unconscious bias, either favorable or non-favorable towards, say, a particular nationality, then you are missing out on a number of people, who could be very good, but we just miss them out because we have bias towards them or against them. We feel that, okay, so for example, just to give you an example, we are hiring somebody, and then we have two candidates. One is a single mother, okay, and the other one is a guy who is, and they're both 28. They have similar qualifications. They have similar experience, and they are very well presented, etc., etc. Now, if, for example, unconscious bias is there for one of the interviewer, who thinks that, oh, single mother means that she has a lot of responsibility. That means that if something happens, yeah, if, for example, the child is sick, etc., and maybe the female will have to take leave, and then she will not be as dedicated, whereas this guy is 28, single, young, maybe I can make him work till, I don't know, midnight. So it could be anything like that. It could be that bias, that single mothers may not be, they will have other responsibilities, and they will have to do other things. So this kind of bias can be quite detrimental, and maybe we might lose out on a very talented staff, which is a single mother here. So what we do is we do these sessions on unconscious bias, which is the first step of creating awareness. But the second step is, how do we make sure that we actually train our employees or managers to learn how to get rid of the biases? So, for example, if I am aware that I have this bias, what do I do about it? Yeah. That means I make sure that, maybe, first of all, from my recruitment team, we make sure that we have equal representation of gender, or family status, etc. When we are sourcing for candidates. That is one thing. When I'm looking at, I do not, for example, as a hiring manager, automatically weed out CVs of women who are, for example, single mothers, or who have a large family, or who are the only bread earner, or men who are in similar situations, etc. Now, as a manager, I can do that. I can make sure that when I interview people, I have equal representation, so that I can make good comparisons and those kind of things. For us, I think that was more important. That awareness is there, but after that, what do you do? Yeah. And also, as human resources, I think what we have to make sure that in all our HR processes, these things are embedded. So, for example, when we are hiring, we hire 50-50. We source CVs which are 50-50 of gender, 50-50 of nationality, different nationalities, mix of nationalities. Schools are different, because sometimes when you hire from the same schools, the mindset can be similar. So why not look at something which is more diverse? When you promote people, then again you look at diversity. When you have management development program, then you look at a mix of people, which are there, because they also then bring different things. Different departments can also be important, because sometimes people, when they work in, say, front office versus support functions versus HR versus risk, etc., there is a there is sort of like a doppelganger syndrome, that if I'm in compliance, I would hire somebody who's like me, for example, who is detail oriented, this and this. Well, why not somebody who comes from a very different background, somebody from front office, because they will understand compliance better, because they face it. They are on the other side. So maybe they could be good. So these are the kind of things which we are, and I can tell you that it is a continuous process, so we are still doing on educating things. But what we have also done is embedded these kind of things in our policies, yeah, in our HR practices which are there, because it has to become a way of life, that we don't have to have a diversity council at one point of time, because equality is that where you don't even think about it right now. I mean, even though we are in 2020, I mean, it is far from equal, that. I mean, you have been watching news, you hear about what's happening in organizations. There are talks of gender pay gap. even in Western countries, which sometimes we consider to be very advanced, they're not that advanced in terms of gender equality. Yeah. In fact, I would say that in India or China, maybe these are the countries which have been more advanced in terms of gender equality. I mean, the first women prime minister, where was she? She was from Sri Lanka. So again, there are plenty of things which are in different parts of the world have taken place. We still have to work on it quite often, quite diligently. So it's really a topic which is become a necessity. It's not a nice to have just to show that we are diverse and inclusive. I mean, we have employees who come and question us, okay, you talk about cultural diversity, but again, when we have positions open, for example, we have internal positions which are open. How come I don't know about it? Can I apply for it? Do I, as a non-French, for example, in a French company, can I break the glass ceiling, etc.? Those kind of things, people would come up. And as an organization, if we proclaim to be diverse and inclusive, then we have to have actions. We have to show evidence, that we are doing things which are related to that. So again, these are the things which are going through our mind when we are looking at diversity and inclusion strategy in our organization. I have many more things I want to talk about, but at this point of time, anybody has any question?
Ma'am, can I ask something?
Yes, sure, sure.
It's a general topic, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's move to India. In India, na, if you are a female, how hard you work. At the end of the day, you get judged by what you wear
Mm-hmm.
in any institution. Okay, so I'm asking you, what do you think? What process should we adapt to change this toxic situation?
Okay. In terms of wearing what you want to wear, etc. It is definitely a personal choice, and I, being a woman, Indian woman, I do believe in that we should all have the liberty to do whatever we want to wear. I mean, I must say that we do need to keep in mind, the atmosphere that we are working in, the profession that we are in, etc., and at least have certain amount of I would say, I'm right, Sally, I'm trying to find the right word, without being uh, I want to be politically correct here. Yeah, but again, the environment, we also have to do some sort of adjustment, to the environment that we are in. For example, okay, I worked in an ad agency, so I worked in Ogilvy and Mather, in Mumbai. Yeah, at that time I used to have orange hair, I used to wear pink jeans, and those kind of things, etc. And it was perfectly acceptable as HR, so I was heading HR there, and it was perfectly acceptable, yeah, at that point of time. Now when I when I went for interview to Societe Generale in Mumbai, that here became a bone of contention, because people said, oh, HR in a bank should not be like this, etc., those kind of things, that it looks a little bit incongruous, it is completely out of this. For me, I think it was, what I said is that hair color doesn't matter, because for me, this is who I am. I like to color my hair, and this is how it is, etc. But then what I realized is that sometimes when you have, the environment is like that a little bit, so I changed a little bit. I colored my hair a lighter shade of orange, okay, I mean, sorry, a darker shade of orange, which doesn't look very incongruous, just to become part of the banking culture which is there. But I did not leave my individuality. I still wore big earrings, I was wearing very colorful things, etc., because that's what I am. For me, I think I do believe that there should not be an issue, but of course it should be decorum. The decorum should be maintained, because there are certain, for example, if I'm a doctor and I'm like completely frivolous, you're not going to come to me. It's the same if I work in a bank. I do need to look a bit serious, no? I mean, even though I'm not very serious, but sometimes you do want to look the part, because if people are entrusting you with your money, then they would want to have somebody who really looks serious about money. It's the same for advertising. You don't go to an advertising company and expect people in pinstripe suits. You would expect people to be creative, long flowing hair, different kind of things, etc. So for me, I think it's a balance between the two. Yeah. So like you may want to do whatever you want to do, but you also have to see where you are working. Yeah, some places can be unreasonable, and I don't want to say anything about that. For me, wherever I worked, whether I worked in SR, when I worked in Tata TD Waterhouse, or in Ogilvy and Mather, and in Societe Generale India, I did not have an issue. I wore Indian clothes, I wore Western clothes, I had colored hair, I had short hair, and frankly, I did not have any issue. I think it's also a question of how you carry yourself, whether you are carrying yourself with respect and dignity, etc., then nobody will say anything. I think that's what I feel. Yeah. I don't know whether it answers your question, Sally.
Yeah, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Uh,
Any?
I have a question. My name is Krishna Kumar. I'm a
Yeah.
faculty at the Asian School of Business.
Yeah.
When you say you are promoting this diversity within your organization, do you
Mm-hmm.
see it really percolating down in the sense like if you have, say, a combination of Koreans and Hong Kong Chinese and Chinese and Indians, would you find Indians grouping together, Koreans grouping together, talking in their language despite being a global organization?
Yeah, and that's a very very important point which you are making, because just talking about this to someone, it's true that we have diversity, and then people club together and then they talk amongst themselves. Go to, say, a Korean will go to Korean restaurant, Indians will go to Indian restaurants together. Yeah, so it does happen, and I think that's where the challenge lies. Is the difference between diversity and inclusion, where, for example, say our Indian colleagues here or the Korean colleagues here feel equally at ease with people of different nationalities. So this is frankly a very important topic for us, and we are working on it. That's why we have our group activities that we do. We try to dismantle that. We have something called staff club, where we have different groups like the running clubs. We have the Bollywood dance club, by the way. We have Korean cooking class, etc., where we actually encourage people to come together and mix with different cultures. It is very difficult, let me tell you. We still find people, and the thing is, there's nothing wrong. So for example, if I'm an Indian and whole day I'm speaking English in Hong Kong, and I do want to speak in my mother tongue, and I do find somebody who speaks in Hindi, I will speak to the person. So there's nothing wrong after office hours. But you're right, it becomes a groupism. uh, we are trying to tackle it. It's not easy at all. Yeah, we still have, for example, a lot of French people on the trading floor, and when they are together in meetings or when they are near the coffee machine, etc., of course they would speak in their own language. And sometimes people from a different nationality who doesn't speak the language feels sort of not included. So what we have tried to do is, in meetings where we have, say, majority of one nationality, and even if one person is different, we say that the meetings have to happen in English. Yeah. Uh, Even with Paris, when we have meetings, if only I am the only one, from Asia, who doesn't speak French, they all, even though it's very difficult for them, they conduct the meeting in English. Um, Through our staff clubs, through, say, for example, as a manager, I also try my best to make sure that I have mixed group of people who are working together on projects, etc., so that we don't have this groupism kind of thing, where people stick to each other because of familiarity and because of nationality. But I must agree that it is very difficult. If you have some ideas, you can let us know. We are always trying to find new ways. Yeah.
Because I've seen that if there are Chinese in your organization, I've normally when they talk to each other, they find it impossible to speak in English. I mean, that
I
is
think
what I've.
if
But
they are talking amongst themselves, which is fine, I
but
think
in
they.
the presence of others, other.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we try to do. So we started on one of our floors, which has almost 100 employees. So this is what we said in the common areas, that, oh, if you please speak in English. I mean, it's a little bit strange, but but that's what we tell our managers, that when you're together and there's somebody coming from a different nationality and you're talking in a foreign language, please can you switch to English to include others. So again, it's awareness, because some people just do it naturally, and for some people it takes a long time. So we're trying to do that, but again, I'm telling you, it's a comfort factor. If after whole day I'm tired and I just go for coffee or for a drink, etc., and I have somebody who speaks my language, I would drift towards it. So we identify that, but it's tough. It's tough. Yeah.
One more point I wanted to ask you. You said that when you look at promotions, diversity is considered. Is that fair? Because the promotion should be on capability. Why
Yeah.
should diversity come there?
No, so we do not downplay meritocracy. So I'm not saying, it's basically what we are saying is, we want our managers to look hard, and look at people who are equally qualified. But what we also want them to look at is that, is their team diverse enough? Are they, for example, when they are recruiting people, are they recruiting people from the same school, from similar nationality? Like, just to give you an example, as a French organization, we are known for structured products, so we are number one in that. So that also depends a lot on financial engineering, and a lot of financial engineers are French, because they're the best in this. So if you go to HSBC, Citi and all, most of the financial engineers are French. Okay, now again, for us, what we want to tell them is that it's easy, when you are hiring people with similar background or who are proven to have a track record, etc. Do you want to take a chance, risk, and look at other profiles, because maybe they may think differently? So that's why when we are promoting people, we also want them to look at this, whether they have diversity of thoughts, whether they have gender diversity, nationality. We do not, for example, okay, just to like, for example, when we do managing director promotions, there are very few seats, okay, and there are a lot of candidates. I mean, even though we are lacking a lot of women at that level, doesn't mean that all women who are directors will automatically get eligible for being managing director. No, we still go through the thing. We go by meritocracy, and we look at the case by case basis. We do not believe in positive discrimination, though sometimes people may feel that, the men may feel that, but again, all the women that we have promoted, all the other people who are different nationalities and all, it's purely based on meritocracy. So I take your point, and I think this thing, we are very focused that it is based on merit, and it is not seen as just because you are a diversity case that you become the head or become a managing director or get it, etc. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so let me continue with the diversity journey that we have. So I was talking about, taking some concrete steps in organizations to make sure, and frankly, why do we embed it in our HR processes? Is because in the beginning, whenever you are making a change, in the beginning, I think you need to be a dictator. You need to have. So even though I'm not in favor of quotas, etc., I do think in the beginning, when you're trying to make a change, you need to have those defined kind of criterias. And once it becomes like a way of life, then you can take it off. But in the beginning, you have to, because sometimes these topics are not taken seriously by everybody, because some people do not believe in it, etc. Or some people may be cynical about it. Some people might say the same thing, that you mentioned earlier, which is that it is discrimination, or is positive discrimination, etc., and then it's not meritocratic and those kind of things. So plenty of things can happen. So we need to be really very careful about how we are defining what we want to achieve, and do we have measures. And I think it's really important if you want to see a change. If you don't want to see a change, you can do the activities for ages and maybe nothing can change. So you really need to be very careful about what is it that you're doing. And at the end of year 1, year 2, year 3, this is a change that we want to see. Because sometimes you have to take some drastic steps. So, for example, some banks like Citibank, for example. Okay, now in banking, in senior level, as I said, there are very few women. So what they did, if you cannot grow people from within, in terms of diverse profile and all, they hired 5 women MDs. Okay, that, and then it was in the news, so they publicized it because they were saying, oh, we are diverse and this and that. So basically, we hired. So sometimes companies have to take drastic steps of either grooming the talent from within or maybe buying from outside, because you do not have the pipeline. And that's the issue most of the banks face. Now, again, if we go into a lot of reasons why certain things are not being done, etc., it could be variety of reasons. In some countries, as I said, in China, we have many senior leaders who are women. Yeah, because it's the culture is like that they actually grow, etc. Taiwan, we have quite a few, but Japan, we don't have. Now, Japan is also a cultural issue because their women, either after some time they want to stay at home or be homemakers, and society as a whole do not promote women, in terms of how they look at women. So that's the same in Korea, for example. So we have to, when we work in a diverse environment in APAC with different countries, we have to also look at country by country, because the same issues that the issues are not the same everywhere. For example, for LGBT plus in Hong Kong, we are quite good and quite open about it. But in Singapore, we can't talk about it because the government does not support it. Yeah. In some other countries, like in China, etc., they don't want to talk about it. We thought earlier, we were under the assumption that Japan is not very open to it. But in fact, they are the ones who launched the network, and they're doing pretty well. The one that we find most difficult to carry out is on differently abled. As an organization in APAC, we find it really difficult. First of all, because we are not used to, as an organization, to hire people with maybe visible disabilities. We may have people who have invisible disabilities, but they don't want to come out because they still think that if they come out, maybe they will not be treated equally. So again, as an organization, it's a challenge for us, to create that awareness that we really do not discriminate based on these things. There are plenty of perceptions that people have. So that perception, we have to, of course, work on this perception, quite well. And then we have to look at how we can manage these perceptions in a positive way. So it is a challenge. The employee networks, what we call employee resource groups, etc., and you may have read about them or heard about them. They are very difficult to manage. Yeah. So you will have employee volunteers. So we do not have somebody who is dedicated to these network chairpersons. These are employees who have a day job, and then in addition, they do things because they're passionate about it. Then they have a committee of employees, they have employee volunteers, and they have a sponsor from the executive committee. Now, employee networks, again, it depends on whether you have people who are real champions. And then in organizations where you have attrition, people move or they move countries, etc., then what happens? Will it die down? So how to build sustainable networks which will continue the momentum and also add on to this agenda that we are trying to push under diversity and inclusion? That becomes quite difficult. So you do need to have, and that's why you need to have somebody to manage the diversity and inclusion network. So for us, it is human resources. In some organizations, there is a dedicated diversity and inclusion officer, who does a number of things, etc. But again, for me, it depends on organizations. What is it that you want with it, etc.? Do you want to combine it? Do you want to place this position in business? I mean, what is the aim that you are trying to do? For us, I think the aim is to make sure that we are an inclusive organization. We want people from different backgrounds, different orientations, etc., to feel that they are treated equally, that there is no discrimination, that they can be who they are when they come to the organization. So I think that is the important point for us, and this is how we have worked on this over years. It has been 5 years, and it has been a long journey. And I can tell you, it is sometimes quite tiring also, because it doesn't give you results immediately. So if you're looking for KPIs and those kind of things, return on investment, it is a long journey. Where we want to make quick changes, then you have to take drastic actions. And again, it depends on the culture of the organization. It depends on who is pushing. Do you really have champions, who are there? And you cannot work only with one champion. You need to have multiple champions and influencers in the organization who can carry the torch, and then make sure that things happen. Otherwise, it will not happen. It's like, I mean, this analogy is a little bit strange, but for example, in social media, if you don't keep on feeding, okay, every day, different pictures. So I don't know, on Instagram, for example, you would see influencers. Yeah. The influencers have to regularly keep feeding new pictures, some new items, some sensation, etc., for their audience to really feel that something is happening. It's the same for these kind of networks. You have to continuously keep on doing things, be there at the top of the mind, do things which are meaningful, and do things which actually resonate with the people. And frankly, we will not cover 100% of the employees, because not everybody is passionate about gender diversity or cultural or LGBT plus, etc. So we have to be mindful that it will not yield result in the short run, but in the long run it may help us to do a number of things, for the organization. So you have to be perseverance is very important, patience is very important, but also somebody who actually is looking at the strategic vision for diversity and inclusion, not just activities, because frankly, I'm totally against just doing activities and actions, etc. It has to have some meaning, and it has to have some goal, which is there. So yes, this is it from me. We have 10-12 minutes. Do you have any questions? Yes, Vishnu, I can see your hand raised.
Uh, Good evening, ma'am. Just before your talk, I was just going through your gender and diversity report of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing which caught my attention was on the fair compensation policy. There's a specific mention that 13 million euros have been used to fix around 6,000 odd compensation parity issues. And there is another mention about another budget of 7 million euros earmarked in 2019 for the same cause. So was it done as an organization-wide initiative, or was it a result of some legislative action?
So this is more actually as part of the legislative action. I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago, UK, for example, they said that they want the organizations to basically publish, the gender gap, the pay gap, sorry, pay gap based on gender. So that was legislation, and in Europe, it was similar thing which came up. Now we don't have the same thing in APAC right now, but it's a good exercise, frankly. However, not very easy, when you are comparing, because when you have to compare jobs, you have to compare apple for apple, and sometimes in organizations you may not have jobs which are very similar, and people with similar profile, etc. I think it is the gender pay gap does exist, um, and organizations are working towards it. So a lot of banks actually have done a lot of these things, what we have done in terms of, fill the gap, etc. It is a historical issue. So if you go into the history of gender pay gap and all, you'll see that from the beginning, when people were when women and men entered workforce, women entered later than men, etc. And then for some reasons in some countries, etc., women are paid lesser. For example, when we hire traders, if they have similar profiles, etc., we would pay them exactly the same amount. Yeah. We don't make that kind of distinction. But for certain jobs, I think it is historical kind of thing. So it is a good exercise, and it's very also difficult to really have the real gap. Yeah, because as I said, you need to have apple and apple in terms of comparing the jobs. Whereas in APAC, for example, we don't have many jobs which are similar. There are Some people are looking after emerging markets. Some people are looking after G10, this, that, etc. So it's very different. So gender pay gap definitely exists. We have done some work on it. For APEC, we have done some studies which were, of course, not published because it's not required by law, etc., to do it. And we did find that in some departments, okay, when you go deeper, because what you are looking at is on the surface, because we don't publish department by department data. But when you go into department, you will find that in some cases the opposite one, where females are getting much higher than males, and in some cases it's vice versa. So it has to be treated with care, and the decisions that we take based on these reports is also quite sensitive, So, but I think it's an issue which we need to fix. It's tough. It's tough on this part, because what you see in the published report is overall gender pay gap.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, ma'am. Deepu here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tipu.
I have got a question. See,
Yes.
I usually handle the HR and OB course for the students. So once when I was handling this course on HR and OB, and when I was discussing this diversity concept, so I just mentioned about the concept of fault lines. That is, diverse groups or groups which are formed within groups based on diversity factors. So, is it good or bad for the institution? Fault lines or creation of fault lines, is it good or bad for the organization? Actually,
So can you just define again fault line?
fault lines usually are diversity-based groups which are formed inside the organization.
Okay. Okay. I think we did discuss this earlier, that when you have people who are sticking together or groups sticking together with similar kind of profiles, yeah, that's what you mean, Deepu, yeah?
Yeah,
Who
yes.
are together.
It could
See,
be
you can,
it could be based on their race, based on their ethnicity, or based on gender or whatever.
for me, I think there are both positives and negatives, because when you have people with similar backgrounds or race, etc., together, I think it's also sense of belonging for that group of people. Yeah. So, and if that group of people they are loyal to the organization, then as an organization, we know that if one person stays, everybody else will also stay. So you can have that kind of thing. Or if somebody is from same school, and they are friends together, or this and that, etc., then we know that they will influence each other and stay. So that's a positive. The negative is, of course, if they decide to leave, one person decides to leave, everybody else will be contaminated and all. Now, for me, I still feel that mix is always good. Mix is always good, where people are talking to each other, etc., those kind of things. But reality is that we would have these kind of groups which are there. We can use it to our advantage by maybe, I don't know, engaging them positively, that they understand the organization, they are in line with what organization is looking at, the strategy alignment is there, etc. So we can leverage on it, when we want influencers. So for me, I think this could be a very good way of using them when we want support for certain activities or certain strategy alignment, etc. But it can also backfire. So I would treat them with a bit of a caution to have these kind of groups. But reality is that you will have these, whether we like it or not, we will have. So as an organization, we would try to use it in the right way. Yeah.
Out from your experience, what do you feel like the gender or the diversity based groups inside the organization over these years, are they actually increasing or decreasing? Or people, are they actually being inclusive with others? Are they accepting the diverse work cultures? Are they accepting people from other cultures and things like that? Out from your experience, is it increasing?
Actually, and with all this COVID, etc., you can see that how countries are becoming very protective, and I think the groups are also increasing. In fact, in Hong Kong, where we are, this is our regional headquarters, and we have a number of people of different nationalities and diversity. Actually, I mean, that's an important question. Maybe I should observe more, but I do see that it is increasing. I still see people when they are going out for drinks together, or people when they're going for lunch together. It's actually groupism, Yeah. People from similar nationality or background, etc., sticking together. I really don't know what is the reason for it. Maybe people feel more comfortable, or when countries are fighting against each other, etc., then people feel more safe, within their own community where they can talk freely and those kind of things. I do think that has some factor, but I think it's an important point that you make. I should maybe explore it further and see. But I have seen, actually, I have seen increase in that, including in my own team here. We're like 40 people and we have different nationalities. And you are right. When I look at it, the Indians stick together, the French stick together, the Chinese stick together. Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. It is very much in existence, and I think it is increasing now. Yeah. Okay. Is there any other question? If not, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Mukta Arya, and if you have more questions, we can discuss that here.
There's a question in the chat box.
Oh, there is. I don't know if I can see the chat box. That's the thing. I think I don't have access to chat box.
I'll read the question.
Yeah.
The question is raised by Farhan.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the recruitments happen for sales job mainly prefer male candidates than female, and whereas for HR kind of role, women or female candidates are given preference. Why this kind of process is repeating? Is there any reason behind this?
Yeah, and this is what we discussed, and Sally mentioned that is unconscious bias, because I think because of unconscious bias, people have all these stereotypes that male will be best at sales job because they have to go out and they have to meet people, they have to travel, those kind of things. And HR people think is women because they are women. There are some, I don't know, softer skills. It requires softer skills. So females are good. Again, for me, this is unconscious bias, and this is what we are trying to eradicate, or mitigate when we have managers taking decisions like this. For example, I would, in HR, I mean, we do have males. We have around, I think we are around 40% males, and I do find that there is, of course, difference in approaching issues between males and females, but males make as good HR as females, So there is no, and salespeople, we have some really good sales women. No, they are like competing with people, and they are really good. So again, this is unconscious bias. This is what people have to be aware of and try to mitigate, that when they have these kind of feelings coming in their mind when they are interviewing people, that for HR I need to take a woman. Why? They have to really question themselves and then try to look at other candidates which are completely different profile. So this is really unconscious bias in action. And Farhan, I think that's what the companies are trying to do, is trying to make sure their managers are more aware when they're hiring people, when they're promoting people, when they are everything else, these kind of decisions.
But I think the situation is slightly different because in a bank sales, men and women won't make a difference. But what has happened is, if you're taking an FMCG company or a paint company, where the guy has to leave in the morning, end his tour maybe at 10 o'clock at night, jump into some small hotel for the night. So those are jobs where a company would find it slightly difficult to send a girl
No,
to.
which is true, and also it depends on the country or in the city where you are. So again, I think it depends also on the culture, which is basically quite important. So, but again, in Asian culture, we have women who will tend to home or look after their children, etc. But I have many colleagues in France where, for example, women move here for work, and the husbands are, for example, house husbands looking after their children. So it's also cultural difference. If we are talking of India in smaller cities, etc., of course, I would not expect that the companies will hire women for different reasons. For different reasons, as you mentioned, Vishnu. So for me, I think you have to look at company by company. You have to look at business by business. You have to look at what kind of things are acceptable versus not acceptable. So frankly, it's an art. It's not a science. Diversity is not a science. You have to really feel for it and then take a decision. Now, I'm talking, of course, because I've worked in banking, but I also worked in advertising and stockbroking company, etc. And there, all these things, what I'm talking about works. We should not distinguish. But you're right. If it's a manufacturing company, if it's a FMCG, where you have to go to smaller towns and stay in a motel or I don't know, and inn, etc., then you would think differently. So it is situational. There are
Yeah, that is
there are no
true. Yes.
perfect answers
Yes.
for this. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Otherwise, I'm mindful of the time that we are over 2 minutes
Yeah.
from this.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody.
And I think we should thank you for your time. It was a very interesting topic. In fact, I have also worked in different countries, and we tried to do this diversity exercise,
Mm-hmm.
but unfortunately failed in most of the cases because we tried to take people from a different culture and found that they were not fitting in, and then went back to taking people from the same. I was working in Indian companies, so we were more comfortable working with Indians. But anyway, you have a very different experience, so it was good to sort of hear about it, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
this becomes important in the future. In our case, there is something interesting because in Asian School of Business we have almost 50% girls and 50% boys.
Mm-hmm.
So the gender diversity is possibly the best mix in both our senior batch and junior batch.
Mm-hmm.
And we find that companies, except for what Farhan said, in certain sales jobs, people are interested to take only boys. But otherwise, girls get an equal opportunity. We don't find companies discriminating against girls. And
Yes.
some of our girls have done wonderfully well. They are best performers in their jobs. So it is not that they are any way worse than boys, or they do
Mm-hmm.
equally well, and which has been seen. So maybe after a few more years, at least in India, the gender issue may not be a major factor, except
Yeah.
for factory jobs or something like that. So
Yeah.
it was a great opportunity hearing from you. Thank you very much for giving us your time. And on behalf of ASB family, I would like to express our heartfelt thanks for the session.
Yeah. Thank you. It was a pleasure. So as I said, if you want to connect with me, you're welcome to. Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you. Thanks, everyone. Bye
Thank
bye.